Let me lay down some truth for you, the kind they don't print in fancy books. There are exactly 3 things you can count on in this life. 1. The taxman will always find you, even if you're hiding out in a truck stop in Wyoming with a fake mustache and a new name. 2. A beautiful woman will always cost you more than you planned, either in cash, sanity, or, as you're about to find out, brake fluid. And 3. You ain't truly tasted freedom until you've wrapped your fist around the artery clogger 5000 from a joint in Bumfluff, Arizona, run by a woman named Marge who uses a bowling pin as a rolling pin and whose secret ingredient is, I suspect, pure, distilled joy mixed with a healthy disregard for modern medicine. I was parked in the cab of my rig, Betsy, a magnificent Kenworth W900 that's seen more miles than a politician's lies. She ain't just a truck, she's my partner. That deep crimson paint job has faded under a million suns, turning a sort of noble, dusty rose color, and the chrome grille is pockmarked from a billion bugs, each one a tiny, splattered story from a different state. On the dash, I got a bobblehead of a hula girl who's lost her skirt in a particularly nasty pothole incident outside of Nashville, a faded photo of my old dog, Buster, who could fart the alphabet, and a sticker that says, "I don't break for vegans." Betsy's my mobile castle, my therapist's couch, and my front row seat to the greatest show on earth, America. She's got a personality, this old girl. The driver's side door groans like an old man getting out of a chair. The radio only plays classic rock stations, even if I try to tune it to something else, and the air horn has a habit of going off if a Prius gets too close, all on its own. I swear she does it on purpose. I was deep into the second act of that Burger Symphony, a masterpiece of culinary architecture. The American cheese was melting down my knuckles, a glorious orange lava flow of processed perfection, clinging to my beard like a long-lost lover. The bacon was so perfectly crisp it shattered like glass when you looked at it too hard, a salty explosion in every bite that sent shrapnel of porky goodness across my tongue. The patties were hand-smashed on a flat-top grill that hadn't been properly cleaned since the Nixon administration, giving them a crust of history, a flavor of honest work, and 1,000 other burgers that came before. On the stereo, Lemmy from Motorhead was gargling with gravel and screaming about the ace of spades, the speakers vibrating the whole cab, and I was in my happy place, boys. A 300-pound slice of red-blooded American paradise, floating on a cloud of diesel fumes and rock and roll. The sun was hammering the asphalt outside, making the air shimmer like a ghost with heat stroke. I was on my mandatory 30-minute break, which, by a complete and beautiful coincidence that my dispatcher never needs to know about, always happens to fall near a 5-star greasy spoon. My gut was full. My wallet was reasonably thick for a Tuesday, and the road ahead was as open as a bartender's ear on a slow night. Life was good. Too good, maybe. The universe hates it when a guy like me gets too comfortable. It's like it has a personal alarm that goes off whenever my contentment level reaches a certain peak. That's when the universe decided to throw a curveball at me. A curveball dressed in a penguin suit, walking through hell. She was trudging along the shoulder of I-40, a black-and-white mirage in the 100-degree heat. She looked as out of place as a salad fork in a slaughterhouse or a librarian at a monster truck rally. Cars were swerving around her like she was a piece of blown-out tire, their horns blaring in a chorus of indignant confusion. She was in the full nun get-up, the long black robe that was probably collecting heat, like a solar panel, the white bib thing that I'm pretty sure has a fancy name I'll never learn, the headpiece that looks like a folded napkin from a 5-star restaurant, the whole 9 yards, a walking, talking, melting holy relic. My first thought wasn't, oh, a woman of the cloth in distress. My first thought, because I'm a simple man, was, that lady's going to turn into a puddle of holy water if she walks another 10 feet. My second thought was that she had surprisingly good posture for someone who was actively melting into the Arizona pavement. She walked with a purpose that seemed to defy the heat waves rolling off the blacktop. Behind her, about a quarter-mile back, a tour bus was pulled over, looking real sorry for itself, with a plume of thick black smoke rising from its engine bay, like a sad little signal fire to God that his delivery was going to be late. A whole flock of other nuns were huddled together by the guardrail, fanning their faces with prayer books and looking as lost as a fart in a hurricane. But this one, she was different. She was a breakaway, a lone wolf, a maverick. She was marching with her thumb out, a tiny, determined fist pointed at the horizon, a woman on a mission that clearly did not involve waiting for roadside assistance. Now look, I'm no saint. My halo's been used as an ashtray more than once, and my list of sins is probably longer than the owner's manual for this truck. I've broken hearts, speed limits, and the occasional bar stool. But my mama taught me some things before she went to the great bingo hall in the sky. And one of those things is you don't leave a nun melting on the side of the highway. That's the kind of bad juju that leads to a blown transmission in the middle of the Mojave Desert at 3 a.m., with no cell service and a load of frozen chickens slowly defrosting in the trailer. It's just cosmic math. You do a good deed, you might avoid a flat tire. You leave a nun to die of heat stroke, you're asking for a plague of locusts in your radiator. I took one last, heroic bite of my burger, a bite that would be remembered in song if anyone was there to sing it. It was a bite of farewell, a moment of silence for a fallen soldier. I wiped the grease on my jeans, God's napkin, and roared Betsy back to life. The Cummins engine bellowed, a sound that could curdle milk, scare demons back to where they came from, and make Prius drivers weep with existential dread. I eased the rig up beside her, slow and smooth like I was docking a battleship. The air brakes hissed, a sound she probably thought was a demon whispering in her ear. I leaned my considerable bulk across the cab, the leather of the passenger seat groaning under my weight, like a sinner on Judgment Day, and shoved the door open. A wave of glorious refrigerated air, my personal slice of the Arctic, washed over her. She visibly wilted with relief, her shoulders slumping for the first time, her whole body leaning into the cool blast like a plant turning toward the sun. "Sister," I yelled over the engine and the thundering bass line, "you look hotter than a stolen pistol out here. Need a ride in the rolling icebox?" She stopped and stared, first at me, this giant man-beast with ketchup on his chin and a beard that has probably housed small families of birds at some point, then at my truck, which is less of a vehicle and more of a mobile apartment building that's seen better days. Her eyes, which were the color of a clear blue sky right after a rainstorm, darted around the cab. She saw the burger wrapper on the dash, the half-empty bag of spicy pork rinds on the floor, the general state of organized chaos that I call home. She looked like she was trying to calculate the exact number of mortal sins contained within a 10-foot radius. I could practically see the gears turning in her head. I flashed her my $1,000,000 grin, or, you know, the $1.50 grin that's gotten me a few free beers and a couple of phone numbers I was too smart to call. Come on, sister. The Lord works in mysterious ways, and today his mystery is a 30-ton semi with a hell of an air conditioner and a driver who's mostly harmless. Mostly. She hesitated for a solid 10 seconds, a lifetime on the shoulder of a highway. She looked back at the smoking bus at her gaggle of penguin sisters who were now pointing at us with a mixture of horror and fascination. She looked forward at the endless ribbon of shimmering asphalt. She took a deep breath, a little puff of courage, hiked up that long black skirt just enough to manage the high steps, and hoisted herself into the passenger seat. She sat down primly, perched on the absolute edge of the leather like she was expecting the seat to eject her at any moment, her back ramrod straight. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was like tinkling bells, a stark contrast to my foghorn. It was the kind of voice that could calm a rabid dog or convince you to donate your life savings to a cause you just heard of. "Our transport, it has deceased." "Happens to the best of 'em, sister," I grunted, wrestling the 18-speed gear shift into drive. It's like stirring a cauldron of stubborn, sticky molasses. "The name's Sam, and this lovely lady is Betsy." I gave the dashboard a loving pat. Betsy's hula girl wobbled in agreement, her tiny plastic hips swaying a silent hello. "I am Sister Agnes," she said, her hands clasped in her lap so tight her knuckles were bone white. She said it like she was presenting her credentials at the pearly gates, a formal introduction to a potential demon. "Well, Sister Agnes," I rumbled, merging back onto the highway with the grace of a charging rhino, causing a minivan to swerve and its driver to make a gesture that was decidedly unchristian. "Hold on to your, holy headgear. We're about to burn some daylight." I cranked the music, because silence makes me nervous. The song had changed. It was AC/DC now, Bon Scott screaming about being on a highway to hell. I may have laughed a little, a deep rumbling laugh from my gut. It was just too perfect. It was like the universe had a sense of humor after all. Sister Agnes flinched, as if Angus Young's guitar riff had physically slapped her across the face. Her hand flew up, and she made a little sign of the cross, her lips moving in a silent prayer. At first, I thought she was praying for a safe journey. It took me about 20 miles of her side, eyeing me every time I scratched my beard or took a swig of soda to realize she was probably praying for my immortal soul. Yeah, this was going to be an interesting trip. The first hour was so quiet you could hear the dust settle. The only sounds were the hum of the tires on the asphalt, the rhythmic psht of the air brakes, and my classic rock playlist, which I'd dutifully turned down to a dull roar out of some misplaced sense of respect. Every time I'd hit a pothole, she'd jump and grab the oh-shit handle above the door with a gasp. Every time I took a swig from my 2-liter bottle of Dr. Pepper, her eyes would track it like it was a chalice of poison. I was beginning to feel like I was her personal tour guide through the 7 circles of hell, and we were currently passing through Gluttony, with a pit stop in loud noises. I decided to be a gentleman, or at least my version of one, which usually involves not burping with my mouth open. I tried to make conversation. "So what's the occasion? Big nun convention, holy roller hootenanny, annual bingo championship?" "It is a silent retreat," she said, her voice starched and pressed like a fresh altar cloth. "In Santa Fe, for spiritual contemplation and prayer." Right. Spiritual contemplation." I nodded sagely, as if I had any idea what that was. The most spiritual I get is contemplating whether to get the onion rings or the fries. Lots of contemplating to be done in Santa Fe, I hear. Good scenery for it, big rocks, lots of sky, very spiritual. Then the aroma hit her, the ghost of my lunch, the beautiful, greasy, all-American perfume of grilled beef, fried onions, and melted cheese that had permeated every molecule of air in the cab. It was a lingering spirit, a friendly poltergeist of deliciousness. Her head turned slowly, like a sunflower tracking the sun. Her nose gave a delicate little twitch. It was the most animated I'd seen her since she got in. "What is that scent?" she asked, her voice a hushed whisper, like she was asking about a forbidden text in a secret library. It was a question loaded with a mix of fear and desperate curiosity. I looked at the noble remains of my burger, sitting in its wax paper shroud on the dash like a king in his tomb. That, Sister Agnes, is a masterpiece. That is the ghost of the artery clogger 5000. It's proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. She stared at it, not with the pious disgust I was expecting, but with wide-eyed, undiluted curiosity. The look a kid gives a puppy in a pet store window, the look of someone who's been staring at black and white TV their whole life and just saw a flash of color. It was fascination, pure and simple. I have never consumed such a thing, she confessed, her voice filled with a strange mix of shame and longing, as if admitting a secret, sinful dream. I nearly drove us into a ditch. I slammed on the brakes for a second, causing a symphony of honks behind us, then corrected. "Hold on, back the truck up. You're telling me, a grown woman in the United States of America, that you've never had a burger? A real, honest-to-God, 2 hands required cheeseburger?" She shook her head, a small, sad motion that tugged at my heartstrings. "Our diet is simple: broth, unleavened bread, garden salads." Garden salads. The words hung in the cab like a foul odor. A wave of profound, almost religious pity washed over me. This wasn't just a dietary restriction. This was a humanitarian crisis. A life without the glory of a cheeseburger? That wasn't a life. It was a black-and-white movie, and a silent one, at that. It was a violation of some fundamental human right I was pretty sure was in the Constitution somewhere. "Sister," I said, my voice low and serious, the way a doctor gives a diagnosis, "this is a crime against humanity. This is a culinary emergency of the highest order. We have to rectify this immediately." I saw the next exit sign. It had a little knife and fork symbol, and the name of a town that was probably just 3 buildings and a dog. Perfect. I yanked the wheel, and Betsy roared down the off-ramp like a beast scenting its prey. "What are you doing?" she asked, a note of panic in her bell-like voice. "The retreat. The Mother Superior will be worried." "The retreat can wait," I declared, killing the engine in the dusty parking lot of a diner called Eat. Just that, Eat. In big faded red letters. I liked its style. No messing around. "I'm performing an intervention, a sacred duty. I'm about to introduce you to the holiest of trinities: beef, bacon, and cheese." Her expression was a beautiful war between mortal terror and divine temptation. I swung myself out of the cab, my boots hitting the gravel with a satisfying crunch, and swaggered toward the diner door. The little bell above it jingled violently as I entered, announcing my arrival. She followed me in like a little black tugboat, caught in my wake, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. The place went dead silent. A couple of old-timers playing checkers stopped mid-move, one guy's hand hovering over a king. The waitress, a woman with a beehive of blonde hair that defied gravity and probably had its own zip code, froze with a coffee pot in her hand. A giant trucker walking into a middle-of-nowhere diner is normal. A giant trucker walking in with a nun is the kind of thing that makes people think they're having a stroke, or the rapture has begun. 2 double bacon cheeseburgers, run 'em through the garden, extra pickles on both. I boomed at the waitress, my voice filling the silence. "And 2 Cokes in a bottle, the glass kind. None of that fountain nonsense. Got beer on tap, handsome." The waitress, whose name tag read Flo, rasped back, looking me up and down with an appreciative, seen-it-all gaze. "Might be more your speed." I glanced at Sister Agnes. Her eyes were as round as dinner plates. She looked like a deer who'd wandered into a firing range. "She'll stick with the coke," I said, giving Flo a little wink. "Gotta ease her in. It's her first time." Flo raised a skeptical, penciled-on eyebrow, but shuffled off toward the kitchen, yelling my order through the pass-through with a voice that sounded like she gargled with whiskey and nails. We slid into a cracked red vinyl booth. The table had a slight stickiness to it that told you it had seen some history. Sister Agnes ran a finger over the formica, looking around the room at the faded photos of local high school football teams and the mounted head of a very surprised-looking deer, like she'd just been beamed onto an alien spaceship. When the burgers arrived, they were glorious. 2 monuments to meat, steaming on cheap porcelain plates, flanked by a mountain of golden, perfectly salted fries. I slid her plate in front of her. It sat there between us like the monolith from 2001, a space odyssey, a mysterious object of immense power. She just stared for a full minute. I think she might have been praying over it, or maybe for it. "Go on," I nudged gently. "It's not a test. There's no wrong way to eat it, except slowly. Pick it up, both hands. Show it who's boss." With the delicate precision of a bomb disposal expert, she unwrapped the wax paper. She picked the burger up with both hands, her grip tentative, as if it were a sacred chalice or a live animal that might bite back. She lifted it to her mouth and took the smallest, most timid bite imaginable. And then the magic happened. Her eyes fluttered shut. A tiny little moan escaped her lips. It wasn't a prayer. It was pure, unadulterated, sensual pleasure. It was the sound of a soul that had been starved and was finally being fed. She took another bite, a much bigger one this time, with none of the earlier hesitation. A single, perfect drop of grease rolled down her chin, and she didn't even notice. She was in the zone, the burger zone, a sacred space I knew well. I just watched, completely captivated. It was like watching a nature documentary about a creature tasting freedom for the first time. She didn't speak. She didn't look up. She just ate. She annihilated that burger with a focus and intensity I'd only ever seen in professional poker players and bears on the Discovery Channel. She even ate the pickle, which is how you know someone is serious. When she was finished, she delicately licked a smear of ketchup from her thumb, and her clear blue eyes met mine across the table. They were sparkling. A fire had been lit. The pilot light of her soul had been turned up to a full-blown furnace. "That," she said, her voice filled with a newfound, breathless reverence, "was a revelation." I grinned, my mouth full of my own slice of heaven. "See? Told you. Beats the hell out of a salad, don't it?" And then she laughed, a real, honest, from-the-belly laugh that bubbled up and spilled out of her. It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard in a roadside diner, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy that made the old-timers smile, and even got a crack of a grin from Flo. It was the sound of a dam breaking. Getting back in the truck was like starting a whole new trip with a whole new person. The stiff, silent, judgmental nun was gone. In her place was this curious, vibrant, slightly greasy woman. The burger hadn't just filled her stomach. It had unlocked her personality. It was like a key she didn't know she was missing. She started asking questions about the different gauges on the dash, about what the CB radio chatter meant when I translated a particularly colorful exchange about a state trooper, about the lonely stretches of road at night, about me. "And this music," she said, as I put on some Guns N' Roses. "Welcome to the Jungle" was blasting through the speakers. What is it about? That, sister, is about Paradise City, where the grass is green and the girls are pretty. It's rock and roll. It's the lifeblood of the highway. It's loud and it's messy and it's alive. Keeps you awake better than any cup of coffee. She listened intently for a moment, her head cocked, a small smile playing on her lips. The singer, he sounds very passionate. Axel's got a lot of feelings, I chuckled, and he ain't afraid to share 'em. Loudly. We drove on, the afternoon bleeding into a spectacular desert sunset. The sky turned into a canvas of fiery oranges, deep purples, and soft pinks that you only get out here in the big empty. We were making good time, but Santa Fe was still a long haul away. The mood in the cab, which had started out as a morgue, was now cozy, real cozy. The kind of comfortable silence that isn't empty, but full. "You know," I said, feeling a surge of boldness I blamed entirely on the burger's afterglow. "A meal that good requires a proper digestive, a palate cleanser." I leaned back, grunted with the effort of a man my size reaching for something, and fished around in the small cooler I keep wedged behind my seat. It took some doing, involving contorting my body in a way it wasn't designed for. I pulled out 2 long-neck bottles of beer, beads of condensation glistening on the brown glass in the dimming light. I popped the cap off one with my thumb, a trick I'm unreasonably proud of, and the best of carbonation filled the cab. I held it out to her. She looked at the bottle like it was a serpent in the Garden of Eden, offering her another more potent apple. "Oh, I couldn't possibly," she said, but the no was soft. It had no backbone. It was a suggestion, not a command. It was the no of someone who desperately wanted to be convinced. The burger had already shown her the path to glorious sin. "Come on, Sister Agnes. 1 beer isn't a mortal sin, not out here. On the interstate, the rules are different. Down here, it's practically a sacrament. Helps the burger settle. It's made from hops and barley. God's little plants. Basically, it's a liquid salad, just a much better one. Think of it as holy water with a kick." She bit her lip, trying to suppress a smile that was fighting its way onto her face. The battle lasted about 3 seconds. She lost, gloriously. She took the bottle, her fingers brushing against mine. The contact was brief, but it sent a jolt right up my arm. "Just one," she said, as if making a pact with the devil himself. But her eyes were twinkling like she was pretty sure she could take him in a negotiation. She took a sip. Her nose wrinkled. It was probably the bitterest thing she'd ever tasted. She took another bigger sip, as if to challenge it. Then another. By the time we'd put another 100 miles behind us, the bottle was empty. Her cheeks were flushed a lovely shade of rose, and she was giggling at my terrible jokes about truck stop lot lizards and dispatchers. "You are a terrible, terrible influence, Sam," she said, her voice light and musical, the starch completely gone. "Darlin', I'm not an influence," I winked, my heart doing a little 2-step. "I'm an experience." The beer, it turned out, was a truth serum. As darkness finally fell, blanketing the desert in a deep velvety black, the cab became our own little confessional, lit only by the green and orange glow of the dashboard lights. "So," I said, my voice softer than usual, feeling like we'd crossed some invisible line. "What's the real story, Sister Agnes? You're not really headed to a silent retreat, are you? Something tells me you're not the silent type." She was quiet for a long time, just watching the white lines on the highway hypnotically appear and disappear under our wheels. The only sound was the low rumble of the engine. "No," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm not." She took a deep breath, the kind you take before you jump off a cliff. And my name isn't Agnes, it's Anna. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands steady on the wheel. I didn't say a word, I just listened. This was her story to tell, and a good trucker knows when to shut up and listen. I was a novice, she began, her voice gaining a little strength. At a convent near Phoenix, I was scheduled to take my final vows next month. To become a bride of Christ, they call it. To dedicate my entire life to prayer and servitude. She turned to look at me, her face half lit, half in shadow, which made her look mysterious and beautiful and a little bit sad. But I got cold feet. I realized I wasn't marrying God. I was divorcing the entire world, everything, sunsets and music and cheeseburgers. She gave a small, sad smile at that. So you made a break for it? I asked quietly. I ran, she confirmed, a note of defiance in her voice. I packed a tiny bag with a few things I'd hidden. Some money I'd saved from the small stipend we got. A change of clothes. I told the Mother Superior I was going for a walk to pray, and I just never turned back. I walked for 2 miles to the highway and bought a bus ticket to nowhere with the last of my secret savings. I just knew I had to go. Away from God? I asked, trying to understand. No, she said, and her voice was surprisingly strong and clear. Away from a cage, even if it was a beautiful, quiet one. My family. They're very devout. They thought it was a great honor when I joined. I thought I was doing the right thing, what everyone wanted. But for 10 years, Sam, I've done nothing. I've read about life in books. I've prayed for souls I've never met. I've eaten bread and broth while a world full of cheeseburgers and beer and angry, passionate music existed right outside the walls. I've never been drunk. I've never stayed up all night. I've never been kissed. That last sentence landed in the cab with the force of a dropped engine block. It sucked all the air out. A Kenworth cab is a pretty big space, but in that moment it felt as small as a phone booth. The air was thick with unspoken things. I could smell the soap she used, a faint lavender scent, mixed with the beer and something else, something that was just her. It was a damn sight better than the usual smell of diesel and stale coffee. I saw you, she continued, her voice dropping to a husky, intimate murmur that did funny things to my insides and made the hairs on my arms stand up. Sitting in your truck, a king in his castle, eating that burger like it was the last meal on earth, listening to that angry music. You looked so real, so alive, and I thought, I want that. I want to feel that, just for one night. I want to know what it's like to be alive before I have to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. My throat felt like I'd swallowed a handful of sand. I can back a 75-foot trailer into a spot the size of a postage stamp in the dark during a blizzard, but this woman was making my hands sweat on the steering wheel. My brain, which is usually occupied with fuel mileage and delivery times, was completely short-circuiting. All the smooth lines and funny jokes had packed up and left town. Anna, I started, but my vocabulary had suddenly shrunk to 0. She reached across the console, that wide space that's supposed to keep 2 people separate, and laid her hand on my forearm. Her touch was like a stray spark from a battery cable. It shot through my flannel shirt and lit a fire that had been dormant for a long, lonely time. I'm not a nun, Sam, she whispered, leaning closer. The space between us vanished. Her scent was all around me. Not really. Not anymore. Tonight, I'm just a woman who's tired of praying for life instead of living it. And then she did something that made my heart slam against my ribs like a trapped bird trying to escape. She reached up with her free hand, and with a series of quick, decisive movements, unpinned the white wimple from her head. She pulled the whole thing off, the starched linen and the black veil, and a waterfall of dark, wavy hair tumbled down over her shoulders. It was glorious. It had been trapped under that thing for who knows how long. She shook her head and the hair fell around her face, framing it in the dim green glow of the dashboard. Sister Agnes was gone forever. In her place was Anna. And Anna was a goddamn knockout, a work of art, the kind of woman who makes you forget your own name. "Pull over, Sam," she said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a request. It was a command, spoken with a voice full of 10 years of pent-up want. My higher brain functions went on vacation to Boca Raton. All that was left was instinct. My right foot hit the brake, my right arm cranked the wheel, and I steered Betsy off the highway and down a dark, unmarked dirt road that disappeared into the black heart of the desert. I had no idea where it led. I didn't give a damn. I killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of our breathing and the chirping of crickets outside. I turned to look at her. Her eyes were glowing in the dark, huge and luminous. She was already unbuttoning the high, severe collar of that black dress. "For 10 years?" she breathed, her fingers working quickly. "I've wondered what this would be like, to be with a man, a real man, not one of the pale, skinny boys from my childhood parish. A man who smells like diesel and French fries. A man who knows his way around the world. Holy Mother of God. I'm a simple creature. I see a green light. I hit the gas. And boys, this was the greenest light in the history of the world. This was a St. Patrick's Day parade of green lights. I launched myself across the center console like a man half my size. Our mouths met in a kiss that wasn't holy or gentle. It was a collision. It was 10 years of pent-up curiosity and 1,000 lonely nights on the road all crashing together at once. It was a hungry, desperate, beautiful mess of teeth and tongue and want. Her hands were in my hair, pulling me closer, tangling in my beard. Mine were at war with the buttons on that damn dress. Seriously, there were about 1,000 of them. What kind of joyless person designs a dress with that many buttons? It was like trying to unwrap a Christmas present that's been sealed with super glue. Too many buttons. I growled against her mouth. She let out a throaty, incredible laugh and started helping me, her fingers nimble and fast. And when the dress finally came open, I saw that underneath the plain black habit, she wasn't wearing simple white cotton. No, sir. She was wearing a bra and panties made of bright red lace, the color of stop signs and sin and fire engines. She'd been planning her escape for a while. This wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was a rebellion. "I bought it in town last month," she whispered, as if reading my mind, her breath hot against my ear. "On a secret trip to the pharmacy for aspirin. I called it my in-case-of-emergency outfit." "Darling," I murmured, my hands finally finding the warm, soft skin of her back. A geography I wanted to spend all night exploring. "This is one hell of an emergency. The sleeper cab behind the seats ain't the Bellagio, but we made it our kingdom. It was a tangle of limbs and gasps and whispered secrets and laughter. She was a fast learner. For a woman whose most recent thrill was a cheeseburger, she had a powerful, voracious appetite for other new experiences. The whole rig started to rock. I don't mean a little sway from the wind. I mean Betsy was bouncing. The kind of motion that usually means I'm on a road that hasn't been paved since the dinosaurs died. I had a brief, lucid thought that shot through the haze. The suspension on this old girl is getting the work out of its life. Hope the shocks hold up. My hula girl bobblehead, which had fallen onto the floor mat, was rattling around like a maraca in a hurricane. It was wild and frantic and perfect. It was the absolute opposite of a silent retreat. It was loud and joyful and human. At one point, she was laughing with such pure, uninhibited joy that I had to cover her mouth with mine. Half worried a pack of coyotes would hear us and come to see what the party was about. The world outside ceased to exist. There was no highway, no Santa Fe, no convent, no past, no future. There was only the here and now. The scent of her skin, the taste of her mouth, the sound of her laughter. Just the two of us in the dark, in the cab of my truck, making up for her lost decade in a single, glorious, breathless night. And then, right at the crescendo, right when the universe was collapsing into a single point of pure sensation, and the whole cab was shuddering like it was in a 7.8 earthquake, there was a lurch, a violent, sickening lurch, not from us, from the truck itself, followed by a loud, agonized, metallic crack, a sound no trucker ever wants to hear, a sound like a giant snapping a steel bone, a sound that costs thousands of dollars, and then a slow, unmistakable forward roll. "Uh-oh," I said, the two most useless words in the English language. We both froze, a tangled mess of limbs and lace and flannel. The truck was moving, and not in the fun way. "Sam?" Anna said, her voice sharp with alarm, all the laughter gone. "What was that noise?" "I think," I said, my blood turning to ice water as the horrible truth dawned on me. That was the parking brake giving up the ghost. We had rocked the cab so hard, with such sustained rhythmic violence, that we had literally snapped the brake cable. I scrambled out of the sleeper and into the front of the cab, wearing nothing but my boxer shorts and a look of pure, unadulterated panic. Anna was right behind me, a hilarious, beautiful mess of tangled limbs, a black nun's habit that bunched around her waist, and a bright red lace bra. I looked out the windshield. The deserted dirt road we were on was not, as it turned out, flat. It was a gentle, but very persistent, downhill slope, and at the bottom of that slope, shimmering under the moonlight like a broken mirror, was a small lake, or a very large pond. Semantics didn't matter right now. What mattered was that it was very, very wet. "Oh, you have got to be shitting me," I roared, diving for the driver's seat like a man on fire, my bare ass sliding across the cold leather. Betsy was picking up speed. We were a runaway 80,000-pound love machine, making a beeline for an unscheduled baptism. Anna wasn't screaming. She was laughing, a wild, hysterical, can't-breathe for gasping peal of laughter, the kind of insane joy you only find on the absolute brink of disaster. She was free, and the universe was giving her a fireworks show. "This is the greatest sin of all time," she shrieked, clutching the dashboard like it was a life raft on the Titanic. I was wrestling with the steering wheel, my bare feet stomping uselessly for the main brake pedal. The air pressure was shot from the engine being off. Trying to stop that truck was like trying to stop a tidal wave with a ping-pong paddle. It was pure physics, and physics was kicking my ass. "Hang on to something," I bellowed, as my lucky hula girl bobblehead flew off the dash and beamed me in the forehead. The truck careened down the dirt path, the sound of sagebrush and cacti scraping along the side like giant fingernails on a chalkboard. It was a full-on comedy chase scene from a movie. A giant, half-naked man trying to stop a runaway semi, while a beautiful, half-dressed, ex-nun-in-training, cackled like a hyena beside him. I finally twisted the key, and the engine roared to life with a protesting groan. The air compressor screamed as it started to build pressure. I slammed my foot on the brake pedal with every ounce of my 300 pounds. The truck shrieked in protest. It groaned. It fishtailed violently, sending us slamming against the doors. For a second, I thought I had it. And then with a final, magnificent, world-ending sploosh, it stopped. The front 2 steer tires were submerged in the lake. The whole cab was tilted forward at a 45-degree angle, like a dog taking a drink. Our noses were almost pressed to the windshield, which now provided a fantastic underwater view of some very startled-looking base and a discarded beer can. Silence. The only sound was the gentle lapping of water against my front bumper and the faint tink-tink-tink of the cooling engine. Anna and I slowly turned to look at each other. Her hair was a glorious wreck. My face was probably as white as her old nun bib. We were both panting, adrenaline singing in our veins. And then we both exploded, not with giggles, with huge, roaring, can't-breathe belly laughs that echoed across the water and probably scared every living creature within a 5-mile radius. We laughed until tears streamed down our faces. We laughed until our stomachs ached. We just sat there, in a half-drowned semi-truck in the middle of the New Mexico desert, in our underwear, laughing at the beautiful, perfect, idiotic absurdity of it all. Well, I finally gasped, wiping a tear from my eye. I guess we really made a splash. She leaned over, ignoring the awkward angle and the water seeping onto the floor mats, and gave me a long, sweet, lake-water-scented kiss. "Thank you, Sam," she said, her eyes shining brighter than the moon on the water, "for the burger, for the beer, and for the spiritual awakening." The next morning, a tow truck driver named Skeeter with one eyebrow and no sense of humor pulled Betsy from the drink. It cost me $300 and a good chunk of my pride. Anna, now wearing a pair of my jeans rolled up to her shins and an old Metallica t-shirt that hung on her like a tent, told him I'd swerved to avoid a chupacabra. Skeeter just grunted, his one eyebrow crawling up his forehead like a furry caterpillar. He looked from me to her, then at the single red lace bra hanging delicately from the passenger side mirror where it had been put to dry. He didn't say a word, just hitched up Betsy and pulled. The silent judgment was worse than any lecture. I drove her to the bus station in the next town over, a dusty little spot with peeling paint and a hopeful schedule. She wasn't going to Santa Fe. She bought a one-way ticket to Las Vegas. "Figure if you're going to be a sinner," she said, with a wicked grin, "you might as well go to the head office." She gave me a hug before she got on the bus, a real one, tight and warm, that I could feel all the way to my boots. "Will I ever see you again, Anna?" I asked, hoping the answer was yes. She smiled, a little sad, a little joyful, a perfect mix of everything we'd been through. "Probably not, Sam the Burger Man, but I promise I'll never forget my first communion." She turned and walked up the steps of the bus, a flash of red lace just visible under the hem of my too big t-shirt as she hoisted her small bag. She didn't look back. I climbed back into Betsy's cab. It smelled like pond water, cheap perfume, diesel, and absolute freedom. The parking brake was toast. My bumper had some new aquatic plant life on it, and my hula girl was officially MIA, probably at the bottom of that lake, but I didn't give a damn. I fired up the engine, cranked motorhead to 11, and pulled back onto the highway, leaving a trail of dripping water behind me. The sun was rising, the road was wide open, and I had one hell of a story to tell. And man, I was starving. I wondered if Marge's place was on my way.